Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 27 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation Future. We begin this episode outside of the Uno home, where we see 4 of the 5 Sector V operatives showing concern and sympathy towards Number 4 because they have just found out that Number 4 is being sent to boarding school. Number 4, however, acts rather calm about it, and he assures his friends that this isn't the first time that he's been sent to boarding school by his parents. He also adds that he's usually able to break out of boarding school by the end of the day, no later than midnight usually. Soon enough, a vehicle that resembles a prisoner transport vehicle arrives. 2 women emerge from the vehicle and they toss Number 4 into the back of the vehicle before they re-enter the vehicle and drive off to the boarding school. Eventually, the vehicle arrives at a castle, and Number 4 is greeted by the head of the boarding school, Miss Margaret. Miss Margaret reveals the name of the boarding school to be St. Rita's Preparatory, and she's leading Number 4 down a hallway, saying that he'll be joining his classmates in orientation soon. Number 4, however, says that it's a waste of time because he's going to break out by the end of the day anyway. And Miss Margaret responds with a comment along the lines of boys being direct, and she says that she intends to, in her words, cure Number 4 of that. Number 4's response is repeating what Miss Margaret just said in a mocking tone, and Miss Margaret is notably furious, or she's notably frustrated about that. But she quickly regains her composure once she leads Number 4 into a classroom. Number 4 is surprised to see that, besides himself, the rest of the class consists of girls, and Miss Margaret reveals that St. Rita's Preparatory is an all-girl boarding school. Naturally, Number 4 questions about why he would be sent to an all-girls boarding school when he is clearly a boy. And Miss Margaret's response is something along the lines of how Number 4 will be a girl soon enough. Miss Margaret then pulls out a weapon, and she says along the lines that Wallabee will become Wilhelmina, I believe is what she says. So this weapon shoots a laser beam, and Number 4 tries to jump out of the way, but his left hand is hit by the laser beam. And Number 4 sees that his left hand now has long, pointed pink fingernails, and he's rather horrified about this. This weapon is a Girl-a-Fire rifle, that's what it's called, and Miss Margaret continues to try and hit Number 4 with the Girl-a-Fire rifle. Soon enough, though, Number 4 is able to grab 2 chalkboard erasers and clap them together to create a cloud of chalk dust. Once the dust has settled, Number 4 is no longer in the room, and Miss Margaret throws a notable temper tantrum that Number 4 has escaped. But she regains her composure after she sees the uneasy looks of the classmates that are still present in the classroom. So Miss Margaret says that she's going to head to her office and tells what remains of the class to just continue what they were doing beforehand. Outside the window of this classroom, we see that Number 4 is outside now. He's imitating one of the gargoyle statues, and when the coast is clear, he decides he needs to call some help. So he pulls out a 2x4 technology phone that resembles deodorant, and he calls his teammates. But while he's waiting for someone to answer, he changes his mind and decides that he doesn't need any help dealing with Miss Margaret's plan. So he hangs up and decides to take care of the situation by himself. At the Sector V treehouse, the other present Sector V operatives question Number 3 about who was calling, but number 3 admits that whoever was calling hung up before she could find out who it was. Suddenly, a blinding flash appears within the treehouse, and number 1's comments indicate that someone is now in the treehouse that they don't recognize. Before we can see the identity of this person, however, we return to Miss Margaret in her office, and she comments to herself about how she's going to tell herself about number 4's escape. So she activates a device, and this creates a hologram voice message of Miss Margaret's future self, who is known as Madam Margaret. And Miss Margaret explains to her future self that number 4 has gone missing. It turns out Madam Margaret had warned her past self about number 4. And Miss Margaret admits she doesn't know where to find number 4 now. Number 4 decides to make his presence known at this point in time by entering the office through a window, and then he sneak attacks Miss Margaret. But he soon sees that Miss Margaret is actually a robot. The top half of the robot seems to have shut down, and the lower half of the robot reveals Margaret is the pilot. Yes, it's a robot suit, and Margaret is the pilot, but she's actually a kid around number 4's age. Margaret proceeds to go on a rant about how number 4 is no different from her brothers, who she doesn't get along with, and she says that her plan is to work together with her future self to create a world with no boys and only girls. While number 4 is distracted by Margaret revealing her plans, the top half of the robot is shown to not have shut down after all, and the robot is crawling towards the Girlifier rifle and tries to take aim towards number 4. Number 4 is able to catch on before the laser beam hits him, and he is able to eventually shut down the top half of the robot and destroy the Girlifier rifle. Margaret is upset. Yeah, she's upset about this because she said the Girlifier rifle was a gift, and number 4 questions who would possibly give someone a laser gun weapon or a laser beam weapon for a gift, and he receives an answer from Madam Margaret, who has responded to the message from her past self. Madam Margaret also says that she intends to show number 4 a preview of what the future will be like, and she does so by sending 4 girls in white and pink uniforms into the office through time travel. Each of these girls have their own Girlifier rifle, and they try to take aim towards number 4. Number 4 is able to distract them when he tosses his hoodie up into the air, and they mistake the hoodie for number 4 himself because it all happens really quickly. So they aim at the hoodie and it turns into a blouse, but it's enough of a distraction so number 4 can escape by jetpack. Though the Girlifier rifles do manage to hit the jetpack, turning it into a purse. So number 4 drops down to the ground and he decides he just has to run for it. But we soon find out that Margaret is able to control the castle's mobility. That's right, the castle actually is capable of moving around. And Margaret has activated the controls so the castle will chase after number 4. Number 4 realizes he needs help now, so he tries to contact his teammates, but he finds out that number 1 and number 2 have been turned into girls. It seems as though, yes, this indicates that the visitor in the treehouse was one of Madame Margaret's minions. And we also see that number 5 was affected by the Girlifier rifle as well. So number 1, number 2, and number 5 were all affected by the Girlifier rifle. And number 4 doesn't know what he's going to do now. All he can do for now is just continue to run for his life from Madame Margaret's castle. Suddenly, we jump ahead into the future by 75 years. So yeah, 75 years into the future, and we see that the world does not look to be a very ideal location right now. We see ruins, piles of ruins of playgrounds and accessories and toys, like it's all in ruins, there's a red sky. And then we start to hear a narration from a boy who grew up in this particular future. According to this boy's narration, he says, for as long as he could remember, girls have been the mortal enemies of boys, and this was all because of Madame Margaret. When number 4 failed to stop Madame Margaret was able to continue her plan to rid the world of boys, and she's managed to create an army of girls under her command. And many of Madame Margaret's minions have gone around not just turning, yes, while they have been trying to turn boys into girls with the Girl-of-Fire rifles, they've also have taken chances to torment any of the remaining boys in the world. One such scene during the narration shows, there's a scene during the narration which shows, I believe, 3 of Madame Margaret's minions threatening a boy to jump off a cliff, and they're threatening him to jump off the cliff by hopscotch. But during this scene, we also see 3 boys appear to help this boy out, and they're able to escape and bring this boy to shelter. The narration continues that a group of boys have formed an alliance to stop Madame Margaret's plan. They call themselves the Boys Next Door. And we see that the Boys Next Door have a headquarters that's underground, and the entrance from the surface is a cardboard box. We also see that this narration is actually a speech that one of the Boys Next Door operatives is giving to his teammates. This boy in particular has a blonde mohawk, and he's wearing half of a pair of sunglasses, so it kind of looks like an eye patch. The blonde mohawk boy also explains that the boys next door are at a disadvantage when it comes to numbers and technology against Madame Margaret's army, and this is especially problematic because they found out that Madame Margaret plans to create a super Girl-of-Fire cannon to turn the rest of the world's remaining population of boys into girls to fulfill her plan. And they don't know what they're going to do to stop Madame Margaret's plan. Suddenly, though, someone tries to enter the Boys Next Door's headquarters. One of the operatives is guarding the main chamber of the headquarters, and we see that the visitor looks to be a boy wearing a hat, and this boy is very insistent that he enter the headquarters. The operative who's guarding the main chamber, though, is skeptical because he's never seen this particular boy before, but the boy with the hat insists that he knows something very important that could help turn the tide against Madame Margaret's army. But then his voice becomes rather high-pitched when he sees a rainbow monkey, and he's rather excited about this. Yes, it turns out one of the other Boys Next Door operatives pulled out a rainbow monkey, and he smirks and comments that they caught someone. The boy with the hat realizes his mistake, and the operative guarding the main chamber pulls off his hat, revealing longer hair. The Boys Next Door operatives see that this boy was actually a girl impersonating a boy, and they're about to attack the girl, but they're stopped by an elderly voice. The elderly voice belongs to none other than number 4. He's now sitting in a 2x4 technology walker. He has an eye patch over his left eye, and he's wearing a black glove over his left hand, the hand that was hit with the Girl-of-Fire rifle. And he simply inquires the girl about why she's here. The girl answers that she came to help the Boys Next Door out. She says that she's heard stories from her grandma about how boys and girls used to play together in the past, and they even worked together as operatives of the kids next door. And the Boys Next Door operatives, however, they think that that's just a myth, but the girl assures them that this is the truth, and she even says number 4 is proof of that because number 4 actually worked alongside her grandma. And number 4 does admit he did work alongside girls when he was a Kids Next Door operative, but he comments about how it was decades ago. And when the group inquire the girl about her name, she reveals her name to be Sally Sanban. She's the granddaughter of number 3. And Sally says that Madame Margaret's plans have caused so much trouble, and they need to stop Madame Margaret so boys and girls can play together again and work together again like they used to in the past. Number 4 comments that Sally very much is the granddaughter of number 3, but he says that it's too late for them to dream at this point in time. Sally is saddened by this, but she does intend to leave, but not before she pulls something out of the bag that she's carrying with her. It's a Girl-a-Fire rifle, and the boys next door are panicking, but they calm down when they see that Sally merely just hands the rifle to number 4. She said that her intention for bringing it was so that the boys next door could reverse engineer it, and then she prepares to leave. The boy with the blonde mohawk actually seems to be moved by Sally's speech, and he questions if number 4 is going to say anything, but number 4 just silently is just sitting in his walker silently. The blonde mohawk boy decides that Sally has a point about boys and girls being able to work together and play together, and so he stops Sally from leaving and offers her a chance to join the boys next door. Number 4 finally talks, and he says they're not the boys next door anymore, they're the kids next door. And both the blonde mohawk boy and Sally are very happy to hear this. Back at Madame Margaret's castle, or her new castle now in the future, a girl enters Madame Margaret's chamber to inform her that Sally is gone, and so is a Girl-a-Fire rifle. Madame Margaret, however, assures the girls present that she anticipated Sally's betrayal, so she planted a tracker onto Sally that Sally's not aware of, with the intent of having Sally lead them to the headquarters of formerly the boys next door, now the kids next door. And after checking out the tracker device to confirm Sally's location, Madame Margaret activates the controls of her castle into its mobile form. So now the mobile castle is getting closer to the kids next door headquarters. Inside the kids next door headquarters, a boy that resembles number 2 is reverse engineering the Girl-a-Fire rifle that Sally brought them. And after trying a few different configurations, the boy tests the Girl-a-Fire rifle on a rainbow monkey, and it turns into a football after the laser beam hits it. So everyone is cheering that they were able to reverse engineer the Girl-a-Fire rifle into I guess you could call it a Boy-a-Fire rifle, going by the same theme naming. Number 4, however, tries to let everyone know that they need to be prepared. They need time to come up with a proper plan to fight Madame Margaret's army. But another operative who's watching the surface through a telescope tells them that they don't have much time because Madame Margaret's castle is getting closer to them. Many of the operatives accuse Sally of betraying them, but the blonde mohawk boy figures out quite easily that Madame Margaret must have put a tracker on Sally without Sally knowing about it. But unfortunately, but that doesn't matter now because they have to figure out what they're going to do now that Madame Margaret and her army are almost at their doorstep, and Sally adds that they're running out of time. And that actually gives number 4 an idea. Number 4 says they need to find a way to get more time. Eventually, Madame Margaret's castle arrives just in front of the entrance of the Kids Next Door headquarters, and we see many of the Kids Next Door operatives preparing to fight Madame Margaret and her army. The boy resembling number 2 actually uses the Boy-a-Fire rifle on a few of the girls, turning them into boys. Madame Margaret is furious about how they would change a girl into a boy, never mind the fact that she's been turning boys into girls for 75 years now. But Besides that, we do see what most of the Kids Next Door operatives are really trying to do. They're trying to distract Madame Margaret and her army, because we see number 4 and Sally since the castle is in its mobile form, that means the bottom of the castle is visible. So Sally and number 4 are on number 4's walker, and they're running towards the bottom of the castle. Sally points out a trap door at the bottom that they can use to sneak into the castle. Using a fishing rod grappling hook, they latch onto this trap door and they sneak into the castle, while the rest of the Kids Next Door distract Madame Margaret and her army. Eventually, Madame Margaret reveals that the Super Girlifier cannon is actually fully operational, and she uses it on the boys that are part of the Kids Next Door. She uses it on all of them, and she declares that her plan to create a world with no boys is complete. That's what she claims. But number 4 makes his presence known through a window, much like he did back in the past. And like in the past, he sneak attacks Madame Margaret. Madame Margaret, though, questions why he's here, and number 4 says he intends to seek help. But Madame Margaret finds this notion amusing, claiming that there are no other boys left in the world for him to turn to for help. But number 4 clarifies it's not aware that he's going to get help, it's a when. So number 4 actually takes the chance to activate Madame Margaret's time machine and send himself back in time. Madame Margaret, though, isn't worried about this. She figures she can just follow after number 4 and stop him from fulfilling his plan. But Sally destroys the time machine, preventing Madame Margaret from chasing after number 4. And that's where Madame Margaret starts to have a villainous breakdown, realizing that it's only a matter of time before her plan falls apart. So we go back in time 75 years ago to the moment where number 4 just hung up on his teammates, and after number 3 admits that she doesn't know who called them, a blinding flash enters the Sector V treehouse. But this time it's not one of Madame Margaret's minions, it's future number 4, and he pleads for their help. But because he's an adult, the rest of the Sector V operatives present don't trust him, and they take aim at him with their weapons. He doesn't reveal his true identity, but rather future number 4 simply tells them that number 4 is in danger. He knows where number 4 is, and he knows that number 4 needs their help. But number 2 thinks that this is just a trap or a trick. But number 3 actually believes future number 4, and she urges her teammates to listen to him and that he's telling the truth. Number 5 questions how number 3 can be certain that he's telling the truth, and her only response is along the lines of, a girl just knows some things, or she says something like that. But anyway, back with present number 4, he's running from Madame Margaret's mobile castle, but suddenly the rest of the Sector V operatives arrive in a flying 2x4 technology vehicle, and they pick number 4 up. Number 4 is grateful for their help, and he tries to warn them about Madame Margaret's plan. But number 1 assures number 4 that they're all caught up to speed about what Margaret is planning, and they intend to take care of this problem now so it doesn't escalate any further. Number 3 is boarding Hippie Hop, and Hippie Hop exits the flying vehicle. It's big enough to hold Hippie Hop, and Hippie Hop is charging towards the castle. The girls from the future that were brought into this time period, the present, find Hippie Hop rather cute, but they do follow Margaret's orders to use the Girlifier rifles on Hippie Hop, but it doesn't work. Hippie Hop is immune to it. Margaret figures that Hippie Hop must be too girly for the Girlifier rifle to have any effect on it. So Hippie Hop actually jumps up and breaks into Margaret's office. Number 3 exits Hippie Hop and destroys the machine that Margaret uses to contact her future self. And then she reads one of number 2's one-liners from a note card, much to number 2's delight. Number 1 also contacts number 3 to let her know that number 5 has found a school to permanently put Margaret in. And that's what he's along the lines of what he says anyway. So the castle breaks apart. The girls from the future just disappear, and number 4's left hand returns to its usual appearance. Future number 4 is happy to see that it's over, and although she can't hear him, future number 4 still thanks Sally for her help. Present number 4 questions who future number 4 is, not recognizing him as his future self. But future number 4 simply responds with a warning that number 4 better not get a mohawk in 8th grade. He's about to warn him about something else too, but he disappears before he can finish his sentence. But it's strongly implied that future number 4 was going to admit that his biggest regret was not confessing his feelings to number 3. Number 4 still doesn't figure out who future number 4 really is, but it's implied the rest of the Sector V operatives found out his true identity, but they don't tell number 4 this. They just say that they're going to head home now. So the vehicle flies back to the Sector V treehouse. Number 3 follows along in Hippie Hop, but then a part of the castle rubble falls on top of Hippie Hop, so we get the running gag where number 3 is ejected from Hippie Hop with her parachute. We then jump ahead in time 75 years in the future, and this future is much more happy than the future we saw under Madame Margaret's rule. We see boys and girls playing together in harmony, and in the background, there's a Kids Next Door treehouse present. And instead of the usual background for the ending theme, we instead have the ending credits feature the scene where Miss Margaret is throwing a tantrum, and it's on a loop. So that's how we end this episode. So this is not only the Season 3 premiere of Codename Kids Next Door, it's also the first full episode of Season 3. Now, while the first 2 seasons each had only one full episode, each being the season finale of their respective season, Season 3 and the later seasons of Codename Kids Next Door have multiple full episodes in them. For Season 3, there's at least 2 more full episodes, so we'll of course cross those bridges when we get to them. But for this particular episode, number 4 got to have the spotlight. And yes, this actually covered a pretty big topic, and I thought it actually had a pretty good lesson to it. Now, as you could tell from the recap, the villain of this episode was Madame Margaret, both her present-day self and her counterpart from the future. And her whole goal was to wipe out the male gender in the world, because she wanted to create a world with no boys and only girls. And yes, this brings to mind, I'm sure many viewers the sad thing is, while Madame Margaret's plans are rather extreme, the sad thing is there are unfortunately some people in real life that do share the same general sentiments as Madame Margaret, hating an entire group because of their bad experiences with certain members of a particular group, and they want to get rid of the entire group because of the misdemeanors of those selected rotten apples. And yes, obviously that's a problem. Making sweeping generalizations about an entire group because of the misdemeanors of a select few is incredibly foolish, and it's incredibly insulting. Because just because some people are part of a shared group, and it's not just gender, maybe race or age or maybe other groups, it doesn't mean they're all going to act the same way. And yeah, it's foolish and insulting to hold everyone in a group or hold a grudge against everyone in a group for the misdemeanors of a select few. You have to learn to it's important to keep in mind you have to look at the actions of the individual, or look at the individual for their actions, not blame the entire group for an individual's actions, which was the case here with Madame Margaret. Madame Margaret was the villain of this episode, but it's not because she's female, it's because she's an extremist who wants to get rid of an entire group, in this case, the male gender, just because of her bad experiences with boys, which we did hear was from her experiences with her brothers. Now, we don't actually get to meet Margaret's brothers. We don't really know too much about them. All we have is Margaret's word about her experiences with her brothers. And this actually, the irony is, while Margaret's bad experiences with her brothers led her to resent all males, and she tried to eliminate all males in retaliation, Margaret's actions caused a reverse effect in the future, where the boys who became the boys next door became they resented girls because of Madame Margaret's actions, and even the idea of the fact that boys and girls used to play together just seemed like a myth to them, until Sally arrived, and Sally pretty much showed them, not all girls are bad just because of what Madame Margaret has done, and she doesn't agree with Madame Margaret's actions, and she tried to help the boys next door out, which led to the return of the kids next door in this alternate timeline. So in that way, that's something I rather liked about that episode. We got to see two different sides having bad experiences with someone from a certain group and having a bad impression of that group because of those misdemeanors of select individuals, but a difference in what happened afterwards. Margaret resented boys because of her bad experiences with her brothers, but she never viewed boys as, she never was willing to get past the fact that not all boys are bad, and she wanted to take drastic measures in retaliation for that. The boys next door, on the other hand, they had bad experiences with girls thanks to Madame Margaret's actions and her crimes against boys. And however, Sally was able to show them that not all girls are bad just because of what Madame Margaret has done, and the boys next door were willing to accept this and work together with Sally to reform the kids next door and to stop Madame Margaret's plans. And you have to admit, the kids next door operatives in that alternate timeline were willing to sacrifice their own existence to alter the timeline, because if they change the events of the past, so the kids next door operatives of that timeline cease to exist. But that is really noble of them, that they were willing to sacrifice their own existence to ensure a better future, and a better future for the kids of this alternate timeline, or the kids of the timeline without Madame Margaret's rule. So that was really noble. And like I said, I do appreciate that the compare and contrast between someone who resented an entire group because of the bad actions of members of a group, but never learning from it, while another group had bad experiences or viewed another group badly because of the bad actions of that group, but were eventually willing to see not everyone of that group is bad just because of the misdemeanors of a rotten apple or rotten apples. So otherwise, this episode also stood out for revealing, yes, this was the episode where number 3's last name was actually said out loud, Sanban. And essentially, when I was looking up the translation for Sanban, I actually found 3 different translations. So I found it being translated as number 3, third number, and third one, as in like the third individual of a group, for example. But yeah, San, I know by itself, San is 3. I do know that. San is 3 in Japanese, and Ban is a Japanese suffix from what I was able to gather. So yeah, I've seen translations along the lines of number 3, third number, and third one or third individual. So yeah, it's, in any case, all those translations seem to fit the general idea, even if they're not exactly the same, but they get the same point across of continuing the Sector V operatives' theme naming, where their real names have some kind of relation to their code name or their designated number in the kids next door. So otherwise, speaking of number 3, Hippie Hop got to appear in this episode, and Hippie Hop actually got to save the day, considering before Hippie Hop usually had an anticlimactic defeat in the past, but this time Hippie Hop actually got to save the day. And Yeah, because the Girl-a-Fire rifle didn't have any effect on Hippie Hop, so Hippie Hop got to save the day. They kept the running gag, but Hippie Hop finally got to claim a victory. And, well, okay, Hippie Hop did claim a victory in the training session in Operation Turnip, but you get what I mean, I'm sure. Oh, speaking of the Girl-a-Fire rifle, yeah, that's right. The Girl-a-Fire rifle, yeah, not affecting Hippie Hop. Like, this actually reminded me of one of the classes I took when I was during my university days. And in this class, the professor of that class brought up about how they consider it to be problematic about how certain I guess characteristics or certain merchandise or certain items are separated as, oh, this is a boy characteristic, this is boy merchandise, this is a girl characteristic, this is girl merchandise, and bringing up the problems of trying to separate boys and girls like that. But at the same time, this professor of mine also brought up how there's a problem with the opposite extreme, because some people may be well-intentioned about trying to discourage that, oh, this is a boys only merchandise, this is a girls only merchandise. But yes, this professor mentioned how some people, while well-meaning, tried to insist that, oh, there's no difference between boys or girls, or it doesn't matter if or the differences between boys and girls don't matter. And while this professor of mine understood the sentiments behind that, the professor also made a point to mention that there is a problem with that mentality, or it's trading one extreme for the other. That was the problem that the professor was trying to bring up to us. And yes, boys and girls do have their differences, but that's okay. It's not bad that boys and girls have differences. The problem is when certain people try to use prejudiced behavior or discriminate because of those differences. That's the problem. And so you have to learn to strike a balance. Like, I do understand the sentiments about not wanting to separate merchandise as boys only or girls only, but at the same time, you shouldn't dismiss the differences between boys and girls. Those differences are quite important for life. And actually, some people have pointed out, a lot of fans have pointed out that Madame Margaret's plan to eliminate all boys would have ended up dooming humanity, because you need boys and girls to keep life going, or humanity needs both boys and girls to continue. So if Madame Margaret did eliminate all boys, then humanity would have been doomed eventually. So you could say that, you could say, though, that Madame Margaret's extremist mentality was so far gone that she couldn't listen to reason anymore, or think too far ahead about the consequences of her actions. And as for the Girl-a-Fire rifle too, now that I'm thinking about it, going along with those sentiments my professor had mentioned, some people were curious about why did the Girl-a-Fire rifle affect number 5, but not affect Hippie Hop. And if I had to guess, at least my interpretation was the Girl-a-Fire rifle was really more Margaret's idea of femininity, or what Margaret considers to be female, I guess, or Madame Margaret's idea of femininity. That's my view of the Girl-a-Fire rifle anyway. So in other words, you could actually say number 5 being affected by the Girl-a-Fire rifle, or some toys being changed by the Girl-a-Fire rifle, or some other items, could also help to highlight how Margaret has an extremist mindset. So you could actually say that kind of works out too, and kind of highlights just how much of an extremist Madame Margaret was. Now, yes, I realize that was definitely a long one, but this was an episode that I felt really needed a lot of time to cover, especially because of the lesson it's trying to convey. But yes, I did enjoy this episode. I think it did a good job of recognizing the problems with making sweeping generalizations about an entire group. Now, yes, for this episode, it was about gender, but the idea of making sweeping generalizations about an entire group and the problems that cause can apply to other groups as well, not just gender. And that's why, yes, I really did enjoy this episode. I thought they did a great job covering this particular topic, because I've never been a fan of making sweeping generalizations about an entire group. So otherwise, there we go for now. That was a long one, but we're done now. So as of this video, we've now discussed episode 27 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.